Hello, hello, hello. Thank you all for being here. Sorry we're starting a little bit late tonight. We had a little bit of technical difficulty, but everybody rallied together. So here we are. I'd like to start with the land acknowledgement. We're gathered here today on the land of the Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, Mississaugas, and most recently Mississaugas with the new credit and Anishinaabe. And we have to acknowledge the ways that colonization and genocide impacts the work that we do here as people who write, as people who read, as people who consume things, and embed that understanding into every facet of our lives and just understand that and to take action, right? So a land acknowledgement needs to be more than just saying this is where we are. It needs to be saying we're going to do something about it. So I really, really encourage you to listen to Indigenous voices on whatever social media platform you're on. They're there. Follow and read Indigenous journalism and Indigenous books, and then think about what action you can take to combat colonization and genocide and the lack of rights and boil water advisories and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirit people, and the lack of action on truth and reconciliation. So please, actually do those things, as well as knowing the land that you're on and the trees that the land is guided by. And speaking of colonization and genocide, I can't take any sort of stage without acknowledging the genocide that is still and really actively happening in Gaza. And we shouldn't be standing by and not doing anything about that either, right? So right now, Canada is still selling arms to Israel. That means we're complicit in the genocide that's happening there, as well as the one for Indigenous people that happened here. And so I don't know how people can sleep at night if they're not, emailing their MPs, speaking up about it, and taking action in that way. And you can also consume the journalism and the books and the movies of the Gaza and Palestinian people as well, to educate yourselves and to, financially reward those artists and those people who are doing that work, and to enjoy just good art, right? Also, we're just really woke around here. Black Lives Matter. This isn't a space for biphobia, homophobia, or transphobia. You know, no Islamophobia. We are really about social justice here, and that's really embedded into our mandate, and it's really what we expect from our readers, our writers, our audience. So please take that to heart. Today's lineup will include a guest speaker with a brief Q&A, and then our 4 readers, followed by group Q&A for them all. So if you are on YouTube, please write your questions into the chat as you think of them. There's a little bit of a lag, so that will help us. So have a question, type it out, we'll ask it. So now I'd like to invite up my co-MC Nancy.
Brockton Writers Series was founded in November 2009, which means we've been active in the Toronto literary scene for, 15 years or so now? Our nimble Brockton volunteers are Dorian Emerton, Vega, Iris Robin-Day, Fish Shustinova, and I'm Nancy Capehart. If you're interested in joining this amazing team and getting some volunteer experience, check us out. Check in with us after the readings, and we'd love to hear from you. We would like to acknowledge with deep thanks the continued support of the Ontario Arts Council, who make this series possible. And finally, our sincere thanks to the Glad Day staff and to you, our audience, for being here with us. Now on to the guest speaker. Cheyenne Nurhazani Fahed is the project coordinator for QT. She has helped guide the organization through transformational change and is a connector, keeping QT grounded in the tradition of zine making as queer community organizing. With a BA in urban and regional planning and a graduate certificate in international development, Cheyenne has worked with 2 SLGBTQIA+ homeless youth and women experiencing gender-based violence. She is passionate about the arts as a medium to highlight inequalities and other social justice issues that the queer and trans community faces today. Take it away, Cheyenne.
Thank you, everyone. Just to start off, I am not a public speaker by any means, so please bear with me if I fumble over my words. But thank you, Nancy, thank you, Dorian, and all the folks at the Brockton Writers Series. My name is Cheyenne, and I use she, her pronouns. I joined QT back in 2022 as a volunteer grant writer. I've since then grown into a project coordinator, supporting all the fundraising and operational needs. And I'm excited to talk to you all today about the Queer Toronto Literary Magazine and finding your niche in independent publishing. Whether you're a writer, an artist, creative of any kind, I hope that my presentation today will show you the strategic benefits of engaging with smaller thematic and community publications like QT. No worries. Nope, it's all good. I will keep going, and as soon as the slides pop up behind me, you will. So when entering into the publishing world, large mainstream media can often feel overwhelming, a little bit like me right now, and often impersonal. But where small or thematic publications like QT come in, they are more accessible, community-driven, and most importantly, willing to take risks on emerging voices. Next slide, please. So behind me, you will see an array of all of the issues that QT has put together since 2020 up to date, with our latest one being the Dyke 2 Shoot Back issue. So just a little background about QT. The Queer Toronto Literary Magazine is a nonprofit dedicated to elevating and celebrating queer voices across Canada. QT was founded by our executive director and chief editor, Pax Santos, back in 2020. Pax started QT as a response to the criminal shortage of Canadian queer literature in magazines. And there are so many amazing queer artists out there, and in times of crisis, especially during COVID, it was more important than ever to maintain community and connection. So QT celebrates queer art that individuals make for themselves and for each other, We accept poetry, fiction, creative nonfiction, book reviews, personal essays, reflections, memoirs, as well as artwork, drawings, comics, photographs, collages, and other visual media that come to mind. Since 2020, we've grown into a vibrant community, as you can see, publishing 17 thoughtful, bold issues with themes discussing mental health, sex work, COVID-19, and other various political topics, all while staying true to our roots of bringing together collective projects to create a sense of shared space. Not only have we published 17 issues, but we have successfully hosted several performance-based events showcasing trans and non-binary artistry, as well as had a presence at Toronto Pride last year, where we were one of the only few literary vendors. Next slide, and I might take a sip of my water. Okay, we'll get into it. So why choose a smaller publication? Well, to start off, you get a more personalized engagement. Each issue of Cutie is started through a group ideation session where our volunteers come together to dream up our theme for that issue. From there, we put together our call, and that's where we leave it up to our readers and our artists to interpret it as they see fit. And there's less competition, which means a higher chance of your work being published. So typically each issue receives between 20 to 25 submissions, and we, depending on the size of the issue, publish between 12 and 15 of those submissions. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that the leftovers are rejected. We typically like to work with our artists, so we'll offer them a spot in our rolling gallery, or if we see that it would be fit better in an upcoming issue, we'll also discuss those opportunities as well. So we really try to find a home for all the art that comes our way. And you get the opportunity to experiment and grow. We encourage all of our artists to be open and free using our prompt as they see fit. And perhaps most importantly, and one that's near to me, is you're not just a number. We remember your name and try to build a personal connection with each artist that comes to Cutie. Most recently, we hosted the launch of our Dive 2 Shoot Back event, where we received feedback from several attendees and first-time artists who were published in that issue, where they had said that they felt welcomed and a sense of community with Cutie. Next slide, please. So from a strategic standpoint, and this is where I like to come in Cutie with my project management skills, this is an ideal first step on one's publishing journey. So small presses don't have to adhere to industry standards, quote unquote, or mainstream media, allowing for emerging artists to be picky and find the right fit for them. We also like to help you grow your portfolio and gain confidence. At Cutie, we put out a call tri-annually, if not quarterly, allowing our readers and artists a minimum of 4 opportunities to create work and build their portfolio. And we try to help build relationships with the editors and fellow creatives. The Cutie community is filled with fellow creatives and local community businesses, creating a network to connect artists with other opportunities to do what they love. And we also want to help start building that niche audience. So at Cutie, we specifically like to highlight queer voices in Toronto and those in the arts industry. But if that's not you, that's totally okay. There are plenty of other small presses or zines across Toronto that discuss topics like politics, humor, fiction, food, just to name a few. And a great way to actually find your niche audience if you're not that sure of it is the Toronto Zine Library. They have over 1,000 zines spanning 100 genres to choose from. So I definitely encourage you all to check them out if you have a chance. Next slide, please. So what does Cutie specifically have to offer? Well, we're open to first-time authors and artists. We don't discriminate based on experience or education. And we love recurring contributors. So think of us as your creative home. We want as much of you as you will allow us. And we offer constructive editorial feedback, not just rejections. Our editors work alongside our artists to provide feedback that feels right to them to enhance their work. You also have the freedom to experiment. We want our artists to be as bold and brave with their submissions as they want to, and feel free to submit their voices and their work with no filters. And at Cutie, you're going to find a passionate and engaged audience. We have a built-in network of fellow creatives within the community, and we strive to work with businesses that are a part of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community, connecting artists with other businesses and organizations that align with their work. For example, $3 Bill in the East End, Glad Day, where we are today, or Black Sheep in Liberty Village. Next slide, please. So our editorial ethos at CUNY is built around inclusion and support. We welcome open interpretations of all of our themes. As I mentioned earlier, we want all of our calls to feel like a prompt that speaks to the artist, allowing them to interpret it as they see fit. There's essentially no right or wrong way to answer a call or submit your work. If you read something that you feel resonates with you, we want to hear your voice. And we rarely censor any of the art or content that comes our way unless it is clearly harmful to our readers and our audience. Our editors are always here to help and not gatekeep. We are here for the artists and the readers. We want to help them enhance their work and their voices and hone in on their skills. And most importantly, our community is supportive and celebratory. The success of CUNY is the success of our artists, and it would not be possible without our volunteers and our supporters standing by us to help us continue to create such amazing issues one after the other. Next slide, please. So why smaller can mean deeper? You get a higher audience interaction. At CUNY, we have over 2,000 Instagram followers, over 400 newsletter subscribers, and we typically have over 100 attendees to all of our events. And we want to protect the creative and political freedom of our artists. Last year for our Pride issue, we called on our readers to say something, telling us why Pride is still a protest, especially in today's political climate. And we offer a home for radical or activist voices that might not be welcome in mainstream media presses, as well as offer a sense of intimacy and authenticity that is rare in mainstream media outlets. We want each of our submissions to feel uniquely their own, providing a glimpse into the mind of the artist. Thank you. Next slide. So if you would like to get involved with CUNY in any capacity, please follow us on Instagram or visit our website, cunymag.ca, where all of our issues are available for free, no paywalls. We've really important to us to make all of our issues accessible to all of our readers and our audience. If you'd also like, I do have a couple of our issues here tonight if you want to browse through them and take a look to see in your hands what CUNY has to offer. But thank you all. Thank you to the folks at the Brockton Writers Group and Glad Day for having us here tonight. And yeah, questions?
We've got okay, we've got questions. I can hold it like this. I have a question to start off. So you said you give editorial feedback. Is that like even for your rejections?
Yep. So even with our rejections, our editing team, which includes our chief editor, Pat, and some other more proficient in the literary sphere volunteers, we'll reach out to all of the artists that submit an issue, and whether it's an acceptance or a rejection, we offer a session to discuss that submission if the artist is looking to submit it somewhere else or keep it at CUNY as its home.
That is extremely rare.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sorry. And I know you mentioned if people, they might not fit into QT, but they might have other kind of niche things, and that they can find them at the Zine Library. Do you have any examples? Like you said, food. Like, is there like a food publication?
Yeah, there is actually a food zine. There's a few of them. One that comes off the top of my mind is a recipe one, where every single month different artists submit a recipe and it's published in a zine.
Oh,
yeah,
that's cool. Yeah. And you pay, right?
We pay our artists. Yes, we definitely pay our artists. So each submission that gets accepted for each issue gets an honorarium of $50. And for our performance-based events, we pay each of our artists $250.
Wow. Okay. Some of the zines probably don't.
I cannot speak on behalf of the other zines. So actually, we do try to be as equitable as possible.
Yeah. Just thinking out loud here, Questions from the audience? Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to
love learning more about QD, and I love that y'all pay your artists as well as keep them publications free. So I'm just curious, like, who funds them?
No, not me personally, but as I mentioned earlier, as the project coordinator, I do all of the fundraising efforts, as well as the operational admin side of things. So when I joined QE back in 2022, the first ever grant that I applied for was the Rainbow Grant, which was funded by Community One, which is a great organization for small businesses, especially small career artists that are looking to fund small projects. It was from there that I, kind of snowballed and started applying to more grants. And more recently, last year, we actually was granted the wage capacity building grant. So it was through that we were able to enhance our organizational capacity and apply to further grants to raise money to pay our artists.
Woo!
The most recent one was the wage, so women and gender equality. Yes, I do not know though that they have another one coming out with the recent cabinet shuffle, so you might want to check the website in a couple of months. Yeah.
Questions for Danny? Okay, Jane, I think you can just thank you very much. I know Jane's a little bit nervous. She looked at herself. So yeah, now that we are, and remember when we pause, like after this, you can hang out for a drink, you can network. Should I just kind of pointed out that like building a creative network is really important, and you can take a look at the zines that are there. So now that we are reaching the world through our very own Brockton series YouTube channel, it would really help if you could, raise our visibility on that platform by hitting that like and subscribe button. You can do it later if you don't want to pull out your phone right now. Fair enough. Look us up on YouTube. Subscribe to us, please. Like this video. Look at all of our past ones. Like all of those. All of our shows are great. I promise. I mean, I'm not a fan of the ones when I was at home during lockdown, honestly, but they're all great. And if you're on YouTube right now, you can just do it. So just do it. So this is the time when we also ask for your donations. So if you have to get a picture, we'll pass it around if you have cash. A lot of people don't have cash these days, but our website has like a big donate button, and you can smash the subscribe button, and you can smash that donate button as well. Can you tell I have a 12-year-old? Subscribe button, that's what all those Game Bros YouTubers say. So it's really important to pay people and try and same. We pay people, we pay all of our artists and guest speakers. And, thank you very much to the funding from the Ontario Arts Council. We wouldn't be able to do it without the Ontario Arts Council. But it's very, very important to supplement with donations as well, especially since we have to pay for all of this wonderful tech that allows us to broadcast to all of you in YouTube land, to have the recordings up so that people can catch them after the fact if they miss it. And also sometimes we have readers from away that we project up there, and that really allows us to broaden the scope of who we program. So your donation dollars are very much welcome. So now for our readers. Okay, I practiced this. Kasha Yank, I practiced it, now I've lost it. Kasha, Juranczyk. Kasha Juranczyk, thank you, is a Polish-Canadian writer, artist, and microbiologist. Right. She immigrated to Canada at the age of 14. Her debut short story collection, Lemons, was published in 2017 by Mansfield Press. She is co-editor of the only anthology of Polish-Canadian short stories, Poland Rooted in Canadian Fiction, Guernica Editions, 2017. Her stories were shortlisted for the Briscoe Prize 2016 and the longlisted for the CBC Short Story Prize 2010. Kasha!
everyone. Darren and Iris and everyone else, thank you for having me. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit short.
Oh, yeah.
Just go.
Better?
Is it good now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'd like to introduce my book a little bit first. It's a historical novel that starts in communist Poland in 1981 and continues to the modern era. And this time period in Poland is very specific because it is when martial law was announced in Poland, which is very relevant considering what's happening in the States right now. So the economic situation was very poor. People were hungry. There was a scarcity of food. They had food rations. There were no products, so no clothing for the children. And women were protesting in the streets, and people were striking in factories. Students were striking. Solidarity movement had started, and the Soviets told the Polish general, if you don't take care of it now with your own army, we're gonna go into Poland. So on December 13, 1981, martial law was announced. And then immediately after, the military police started arresting Solidarity and union workers. Radio stations and TVs were inactivated. Schools and universities were closed, and workers' unions were suspended. I was 4 years old at the time, living in Warsaw with my parents, and they managed to secure passports and visas for us just before that time to emigrate to Australia. So I could have been an Australian beach babe with a surfer boyfriend. But unfortunately, the borders were closed, so we couldn't emigrate. So we're stuck in Poland, and we only managed to emigrate 10 years later, in '92, to Canada. And actually, for the first 3 years of my life in Canada, I lived near here on Carlton Street, opposite Allen Gardens. And also, I went to Jarvis Colleges for 3 years. So the story in my book is the story of people like my parents, people who tried to escape during that time. And what interested me in this specific time period is that during the 2 laws of martial law, there were 15 attempts at hijacking by regular people, by people with families and no weapons who would hijack Polish airplanes and try to escape to the west and land in West Berlin. And one specific attempt was made by women with children and their husbands, and there were 50 people on the airplane, and all of them knew about it. There were also secret police, military force on the airplane. So this is the story in my novel. And what was interesting about the story is that there were no interviews with women involved. All the information was about the men. So I had to invent the stories of the wives and wonder, how did they decide to do this? How did they decide to risk their lives of their children and other people on the airplane and do it? Were they forced, or did they want to do it and force their husbands? So that part of the story is invented. What happens on the airplane during the hijacking is based on actual facts, because the characters are fictional. So I read an excerpt now that happens in the winter just after the martial law was announced, and one of the characters has to get medicine for her child. The streets were empty and peaceful. Large flakes of snow fell slowly around her, sticking to her hair and the fairy trimmings of her sheepskin collar and cuffs. Ivona was too worried to notice the beauty of snow on the sidewalks, and how the tracks of shoes and dog paws in the whiteness looked like magic sign. An image of the Narnian forest inside the wardrobe flashed through her mind. She had been reading the book to Basia in the evening, in the orange glow of her lamp, but she was preoccupied with the task at hand, and the fleeting association disappeared in the fearful and scary thoughts spiraling through her head. The city was eerily quiet, except for the occasional screech of tramway trails. People must be hiding in their apartments, digesting the news of their late weekend breakfast. In the distance, the door slammed, and Harry's footsteps were muffled by the snow. Someone called out, and then it was silent again. Ivona focused on the crunch of snow under her boots, which she had been so lucky to buy just last week. and they were a perfect size, a rare joy indeed. Jerzy, her husband, wore the same leather ankle boots all year round. All she could do was knit him a pair of warm socks with the yarn she had unraveled from an old sweater. There was enough left to make hats and mittens on a string for Basia and Radek. Zofia at the hospital didn't need any. Ivona wiped the wetness accumulating under her nose. She loved watching how Basia pulled one of her mittens out of her sleeve and pretended it was a little red dog on a leash, and Radek chased it in the snow like the kid in the Soviet stop-motion animation they had recently watched. Ivona marched down Rakowiecka Street towards Puławska, which had several pharmacies. As she passed the long cement wall of the prison, Ivona picked up her pace. Pale patches of paint on its dirty yellow surface covered old graffiti. She recognized from the shape of the spot that it had said Solidarność. 2 rows of loosely colored barbed wire stretched on top of the wall. The place gave her the creeps. She half expected to hear the cries and moans of the Solidarity members and political prisoners they tortured inside. She couldn't help imagining how they would break the other's slim fingers if they arrested him. She ran, slipping, along the wall until she stopped breathless at the next intersection. In front of her, she saw a tramway stop sign with its red T on a yellow background with the schedule underneath, and behind it, the yellow barrier fence preventing people from jaywalking across the tracks to the largest movie theater in Warsaw. A big neon sign, Kino Moskva, on top of the building, wouldn't be lighted until evening. On weekends, they screened films and cartoons for children, but the square in front of the cinema was now empty. The movie playing was Apocalypse Now, she read from the green print on the large screen above the entrance. Ivona wanted to take her class to see it after they finished reading Heart of Darkness. She instinctively hid behind a maple tree growing out of a square patch of ground cut in the sidewalk. In front of the theater, obscuring the 2 stone lions at the main entrance, a large armored vehicle was parked. Jerzy would know exactly what it was called, but to her it looked like a tank. Soldiers moved around it, and tire tracks spiraled in the snow. Don't be ridiculous, Ivona muttered to herself. They're not going to show you. She felt a snowflake melt on her lips. A few more attached themselves to her lashes, and she blinked them away. You are a Polish mother looking for medicine for a sick child, not the enemy. And they are Polish soldiers, ours, not Soviet. Who knows, maybe Arek is one of them. Ivona smiled at the memory of Basia's infatuated gaze on her 18-year-old godfather in his new uniform. Ivona crossed the street, slippery with melting snow. She had to walk past the tank to get to the pharmacy. She clasped her purse, handled so hard her fingers hurt. An older woman in a red scarf smiled at her furtively and skulked away. Ivona tried to look like a regular person, not the sweaty, trembling woman with a racing heart, whose husband was in solidarity and was participating in a strike at the very moment. Years later, Ivona would recognize herself in the famous photograph. There she was, in her sheepskin coat, the collar lifted around her face, her purse hanging on her arm. She remembered being afraid of the men who came out of nowhere to go at the vehicle, wondering if they were members of the SB, which is the secret police. She had looked down at the melting snow and hurried away. It struck her how, by a complete chance, by being there at the exact moment when Chris Niedenthal pressed the shutter. Not a moment earlier or later, she became immortalized for all history, like a fly caught in amber. She preferred to remain at the periphery outside the frame of big events. And that photograph is actually a real photo. That was also a spark that ignited the idea for the novel. It's a very famous photo taken by a Polish-British journalist on the day the martial law was announced. And of course, street photography was forbidden. And it's a story like from a James Bond movie. So he took those photos, and the same night, illegally, he went to the train station, and because he knew there would be a train leaving to West Germany. And he had filmed like 10 rolls of film, and he kept asking people who would take it to West Germany. And he found a West German student who was unaware of how dangerous it was. He gave him the film, and that student smuggled the film out of Poland into West Germany. And that photograph is the movie theater. It's called Theater Moscow, which is not a Polish name, but like a Soviet name, right? And the movie is Apocalypse Now, which translated literally in Polish was the time of apocalypse. So the picture with the tank in front of the theater and the title, it really illustrated the paranoia and the fear of that time. So that photograph was published in Newsweek and in Der Spiegel, and yeah, it's very famous. Wow. So that's it. Thank you.
Shoot, all for me now. Okay. Who's up next? Karen? How tall are you? How tall are you? Short? Okay. Karen Smythe is the author of 4 books, including a story collection and 2 novels. Her book on Mavis Gallant and Alice Munro was a groundbreaking study in literary criticism. With a PhD in English, Karen held positions as a professor, a university registrar, and a senior policy analyst throughout her career before retiring and writing full-time. Her autoimmune condition has not held her down. She lives in Guelph with her husband, the writer Keith Hazard. So Karen, come on up.
Thank you so much. Thanks to Dorianne and to Iris and to Nancy and everybody at the Brockton Writers Series for inviting me here today. I'm so thrilled to be here. Really excited to be here also to share with you my new novel called The Town with No Noise. And it's actually going to have its birthday tomorrow. It's an official release day. Get a sneak preview of the book. And I thought I'd start talking a little bit about the cover first before I dive into the book itself. The cover, which I adore, is part of a painting by Egon Schiele. I don't know if people are familiar with his work. He was a Viennese painter. He died in 1917 flu. But during the Nazi period in Germany, his work was considered degenerate and by the Nazis. Nonetheless, it became very, very valuable, and this picture was one of many that was looted by the Nazis, taken from Jewish owners, and it was just restituted, which means the heirs of the original owner of the painting reached a settlement with the then owners in 2014. Took all those years for the family to get some justice for that part of the loss. And Egon Schiele and the painting of his does appear in my novel, so that's another reason I thought it was a really perfect cover for A Town with No Noise. That's a picture of a town. So, and I also want to talk about the title, A Town with No Noise. People have responded to that title and think, oh, that sounds so intriguing. And I actually came across a line in a poem by Derek Walcott that has those words in it, A Town with No Noise. And when I read the poem, it was just so beautiful. So I've included it as an epigraph in my book as well. And I thought I'd read the poem to you because it gives you a little bit of information about the theme of the novel, or one of the themes of the novel. So the poem starts, this page, I'm going to put my readers on because I am getting old. This page is a cloud between whose fraying edges a headland with mountains appears brokenly, then is hidden again until what emerges from the now cloudless blue is the grooved sea and the whole self-naming island, its ochre verges, its shadow-plunged valleys, and a coiled road threading the fishing villages, the white, silent surges of combers along the coast, where a line of gulls has arrowed into the widening harbor of a town with no noise, its streets growing closer, like print you can now read, 2 cruise ships, schooners, a tug, ancestral canoes, as a cloud slowly covers the page and it goes white again, and the book comes to a close. So in a way, the poem is about seeing the landscape from a distance and then getting closer and closer and finding out what's revealed and actually real when you get down close into the space. And in a way, that's what my narrator does in my novel, A Town with No Noise, in actually 2 different towns. So just to give you a little bit of context about the storylines in the book and these towns, my narrator's name is Sam, and she's a writer. She's becoming a writer, and she's been assigned to write an article about a town called Upton Bay, which is just a couple of hours from Toronto, a very wealthy town. And in part 1 of the book, she and her boyfriend drive to the town so she can be there and do some research and write her article. And they stay with her boyfriend's grandfather, who lives in the town. And the more she stays and the longer she looks at the town and observes people and goings on in the town, the more she discovers about the town not being so quiet and not being so perfect and beautiful after all. So a lot of things come to the surface about how the town works, and also about the family history of her boyfriend during World War II in Germany. Then the book shifts in part 2, and Sam becomes the researcher of another small town, this time in Norway, in occupied Norway during World War II. So Sam is informed by her mother that they have family history. They're Norwegian in background, and there is a lot to learn about their family's life in Norway while it was occupied by Germany. And some family issues surface for Sam that she then takes onto herself and becomes involved in a major research project and writes about what happened to a particular Jewish family in that town in Norway, and also her grandmother. So she brings to life her grandmother's voice in part 2 of the book. And so a lot of the themes intersect and cross over between parts 1 and 2, but Sam is the narrator throughout. And so that gives you kind of the storyline about where Sam goes and what she's up to. So I thought I'd share all that with you before I just read a bit from the beginning of the novel. And the part I'm going to read is about Sam and Jay, who live in Toronto, and it takes place the day before they leave for Upton Bay, and introduces a little bit about what's going on in their lives. I'm driving Jay through the trees. It is hot, humid, and my skirt has ridden up high on my thighs, which are stuck to the cracked black leather of the car seat. Jay's is tilted as far back as it will go. He is lying nearly flat with one pillow underneath him and another behind his head, gazing up through the open sunroof that lost its glazed panel years ago. He is smiling when I glance at him. At a red light, exhaust from other engines begins to fill up the cabin, as Jay calls it, because he feels like he's flying on this trip. These runs, as we call them. We tour the valley on the road that winds around mansions set well back from the street. Downtown shrinks behind us as we approach the curving expressway to head north, where traffic will eventually thin out. The trees become fewer and fewer as we snake our way to Midtown. I stop at a suburban bakery where I pick out 2 slices of Black Forest cake, Jay's favorite, which we'll eat later with tea on the balcony of my apartment. I get back into the stifling car and start driving home. What do you see now, Jay? Gray. No, it's slate. It's a light slate color. Anything else? No, not sure. It's getting late, and Jay sounds tired. The pain medication he takes makes him drowsy. It's stronger than Tylenol, but not as strong as OxyContin. Something in between, the pharmacist said when I picked up the prescription, showing her my ID as well as Jay's. She almost didn't give me the bag. When I told her Jay was in the parking lot, that she could go out there if she wanted to make sure his face matched the photograph on his health card, she sighed and handed it over. I signed the logbook, and she rang me through. Close your eyes and rest a little, Jay. I don't want to miss the moon. It's probably too cloudy to see it tonight. Close your eyes. But I know he won't. I'm hoping the clouds don't mean rain, even if it would cool off the air. The tarp covering the sunroof blew off last night, despite the bungee cords I hooked through the windows. I'll have to remember to buy another one for our trip tomorrow. Jay once had his own car, an old pale yellow Corolla, but his ex-roommate Sean had taken it in lieu of rent owed when Jay moved out. I suppose Sean inherited the parking tickets too. Jade had a collection on the dash that he'd never been able to pay, but he didn't worry about the fines because his license plates, borrowed from a friend, were for New Brunswick. Tickets don't stick to out-of-province plates, said this friend, laughing, as if you'd be a fool to think people carried responsibility for their actions around with them like luggage. Jay is nearly 27, but he hasn't given up on becoming a star. He just needs the right band, he says. That's the trouble with being a drummer. You need other people to help make the music. And Jay isn't much good at getting along with people or at fitting in. He's a loner, like me, which is probably what attracted me to him in the first place. Tomorrow, we pack up and head to Upton Bay, where Jay's grandparents live. I've never been there, but I'm going to be writing an article about the place for a friend who freelances. Nick has too much work to write it himself, even though he tells me it'll be an easy piece. We'll be staying with Jay's grandparents because even modest bed and breakfasts in town charge more than my fee would cover. Unlike Jay, who seems to have no concerns about his own debts, I'm still paying off the student loans I took to supplement my scholarship, so being able to stay with his family is a bonus. Nick says he's looking for a brief, descriptive piece only to promote tourism in the area. I'm supposed to feature the young entrepreneurs who are transforming the town's economy via the maturing wine industry. He thinks I'll find more than enough information to write the article. This is my first writing assignment, and if I do a decent job, I might get others. My boss at the cafe made me co-manager last year, and I appreciate the raise that came with it, but I'm bored with pouring coffee for a living. My mother thinks I can do better with my degree, but it's only a BA. Everybody has a BA these days. It's almost what a high school diploma used to be. Jay didn't even graduate from high school. He told me his grandfather Otto paid for him to attend a private school, but Jay was kicked out in his final year for smoking in class, and he never went back. Apparently, Otto would pay for Jay to go to university as a mature student, too, if he'd only settle on a real career and stop this musician nonsense. Jay was named after his father, but when he was a child, his parents started calling him JJ, short for John Jr. He and his father were never close. Then, after the divorce, Jay moved away with his mother, and they grew even more distant. At 15, he decided to drop the extra J. He's not spoken to his dad in over 10 years. Jay told me a little about his family background. His grandfather's name is Otto Herman Sommerfeld, but Jay calls him Pop. He and his wife, Greta, emigrated from Germany to Canada as farm laborers in the early 50s. Otto owned hotels in Upton for years, and as soon as Jay's grandmother dropped dead, he married one of the housekeeping staff. Jay won't mind seeing Pop again, he says, but he doesn't want his father to find out he's in town. I don't know what went on between them while Jay was growing up, and I've never asked, but based on his mood, whenever he mentions his dad, it must have been ugly. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I've also dated musicians. I'm married to a classically trained vocalist, but she's an awesome now. So next up, Adriana Chartrand is a mixed-race Native woman. Her dad is Red River Métis born and raised in St. Laurent, Manitoba, and her mom is mixed settler from Portage-la-Prairie, Manitoba. Adriana was born and raised in Winnipeg and has lived in Toronto since 2013. She has an MA in Cinema Studies and has previously worked for the Imaginative Film Festival and Telefilm Canada. She currently works for the City of Toronto, and she speaks English and French. Adriana?
Is that good? Yeah, that's pretty good. Hey everyone. So my novel's a horror novel, so it's like a bit of a little different vibe. I'm going to read a part that is actually about missing and murdered Indigenous women. It's not graphic, there's no violence in it, but it's about that. And the reason why I'm going to read it is because the book is set partially in an unnamed prairie city, and Toronto, and in Winnipeg last year, actually, I think he was convicted this year. They caught the third serial killer of Native women in the last about 15 years. So that's just the three they've caught, right? And there's other people also committing crimes that are not necessarily serial killers. So that's part of the content of Winnipeg, and I wanted it to be part of the sort of, the atmosphere and the landscape of the book, because it's part of the atmosphere of the prairies, really. So that's what it's going to be, just so you guys know. And I'm going to read you the back, so you have a little understanding of what the story is. Dawn hasn't spoken to her brother Cody since he was sent to prison for a violent crime 7 years ago. But when Dawn's seemingly perfect life in the big city implodes, she's forced to return to her childhood home in the prairie city that still holds so much pain for her and her fractured family. Cody's released from prison with a mysterious new friend by his side, and Dawn must follow increasingly sinister leads to uncover their nefarious plans to access a dangerous supernatural network. As the lines between right and wrong blur and dissolve, Dawn reckons with trauma and violence, loss and reclamation, in an unsettling world where spirit realms entwine with the living, and where it is humans who carry out the truly monstrous acts. So her brother just got her released, and he's shown up with Tyler, the mysterious new friend, and they're driving to a restaurant to have dinner together to celebrate his release. So start reading. The drive to the restaurant is quiet. Oh, and her dad is Martin. Dawn and Martin ride together, and neither has any words for this situation. The night sky passes by the car windows, broken by the nonchalant ugliness of billboards and signs for the procession strip malls. They pass a pizza place that has been there for Dawn's entire life and that she's never seen open or with any customers. They pass a billboard that is a photo grid of 3 women's faces with the word missing in garish lettering next to them and a tip line to call with any information. The picture on the right shows a girl with wet-looking curls and dark eyeliner staring defiantly out at the passing cars, the movements of the city below her. The girl went missing after a party in an apartment building downtown. How many girls have walked into parties and bars expecting a fun night or a dull one, expecting just another night out in a string of nights out, and found instead that it was their last? Found instead that someone's evil eye was settling over them from across the crowded room, from a passing car. This girl, the missing girl, was seen by several witnesses leaving the party alone, but she's not been seen by anyone since. As Martin drives them past the billboard, Dawn imagines a procession of girls stepping into the night and being made to disappear. Dawn always wonders with every new case about the person who knows. How many cashiers, baristas, and waiters have served him, unknowing? It chills her to think of a young woman handing over his change, her fingers brushing his palm and never thinking of him again. He's just another anonymous face in the line of customers. The billboard recedes into the distance, but it stays with Dawn, a ghostly afterimage of its presence. 3 more disembodied faces that most people forget as soon as they've driven past, because they believe that bad things like this do not touch them. Because they tell themselves that somehow those women were different. They must have been marked in some way, even done the marking themselves maybe. Some people will go that far in their justifications. Dawn imagines the 3 faces that are not on that billboard. The 3 faces that may or may not be known by someone who's too afraid or apathetic to talk, by authorities who don't care or can't act or bungled the investigation or waited too long. 3 missing women, 3 people that are responsible for making them disappear. For everyone damaged, a damager. When Dawn was 9 years old, there was a man caught in the city who destroyed numerous lives. He was charged with the murder of 3 women who'd all been reported missing over the last few years. All 3 families of the missing women said the police didn't seem to be actively investigating the disappearances. There were no front page headlines about the women while they were missing. Their families were not asked to give press conferences pleading for safe returns. Only after he was caught were the 3 women front page news, and only then because of what he did to them. The newspaper always led with a glaring headline, and Dawn would watch Violet, that's Dawn's mom, flip over the paper as she drifted through the kitchen. Violet refused to read the news stories or watch them on TV, changing the channel whenever the man's dead-eyed mugshot or the photos of the women, forever frozen in time, appeared on the screen. Even back then, Dawn understood that her mother lived in fear of seeing a face she knew on the news one day, or receiving a call from someone who hadn't phoned in decades, only to bring unbearable news. When Dawn was younger, Violet told her once that she hadn't seen her own mother for 25 years, and they all knew that she had a rift with her sister from before her children even existed. Dawn never met her mother's mother, not even when she was little, and Violet's family had sometimes been around. All the things Violet would never say, all the hurt she couldn't name and couldn't face, kept Dawn's mother from the world, kept her separate. She seemed to her children like a woman divested from herself, adrift and strange. They knew so little of her in the end. But then again, they did know the precise way her voice sounded, and the way her brow furrowed when she concentrated, the way her tongue flipped out to lick her lips. They knew the way she smelled, mineral and cool and like soap. Surely that counted for something. Dawn always knew that Violet loved her husband and her children fiercely, if distantly, but she also knew that Violet would walk away from the things she couldn't bear to see, from the things she'd already seen too many times. So Dawn watched her mom flip over the newspapers, but Dawn read the stories. She learned that the man would wait until a storm hit, increasing the odds of a woman accepting his offer of a ride. He further increased those odds by bringing along his small son, whose presence must have reassured the women that he was a good, wholesome father, that they would be safe with him. Pale eyes behind glasses scanned the sidewalks and corners. Stubby fingers, wedding ring shiny and clearly visible, flicked restlessly through radio stations, snippets of pop songs cut off abruptly. And in the backseat, a little boy, bored, kicked his legs in the air and asked his dad what they were doing. Wheels rolled and rolled. Rain smacked the pavement. Wheels rolled gently to a stop. The man was caught on a summer night when the neighbor's insomniac son stepped on the back porch to smoke a joint at 3 a.m. He heard the man digging under the big maple tree in his backyard and saw a big shape in the dark that didn't look right. He dropped the joint, went inside, and called the police. The perpetrator was a longtime manager at a local pharmacy. He'd been married to his high school sweetheart for 12 years. An ordinary man, by all accounts. The evening news covered the story for a week, replaying the same interviews with a handful of friends, co-workers, neighbors. They all expressed shock, stressed how there were no signs of anything amiss. They all said he was such a great guy. Dawn got tired of the news anchors who shook their heads solemnly and said, "It's such an unbelievable story," and then introduced the next segment. Talked about a fundraiser for veterans and an upcoming agricultural fair, celebrated the 25th anniversary of a family-owned diner downtown. Then they did it again the next night until the women's story was dropped from the rotation. Of course, it wasn't really their story, and that was perhaps the final cruel twist. It was his story. He'd written them into his terrible narrative and then ended theirs, a particularly human barbarism. The interest of the general population waned and let go, if it had ever been peaked to begin with, quickly swallowed up by the pall of indifference that hung over the city. These women weren't the right kind of women for the type of victimhood that inspired Dateline episodes and countless threads on Reddit. Strangers weren't haunted by the case. In fact, the rest of the country barely picked up the story. There were a few scattered national news reports and articles in the days immediately after the arrest, and then there was nothing. If he was remembered at all, the man would quickly become something other than a man. A beast, a monster, a devil. But the names would all mean the same thing, not human. Not just not like us, but not of us. In other words, not our problem. An abhorrent anomaly that couldn't have been foreseen. Unfixable, so why bother trying? Best not to look at it too closely. What was so confounding about the fact of an ordinary man's violence? So many people needed monsters to look monstrous. They couldn't accept, despite all the evidence to the contrary, that the demons looked just like them. That a seemingly regular life could conceal a deeply vicious soul. The women's purses and shoes were found in a cardboard box with mold growing along the waterlogged flap shoved to the back of the garage. It wasn't particularly well hidden for the years it sat there, collecting rain runoff and dust. The man's wife later said she didn't notice the box or its contents. She rarely even entered the garage. That's his space, she said. The son was whisked away by his mother quickly and quietly to her hometown in British Columbia, and there was nothing more reported about him. Dawn wondered what the boy looked like, but there were no photos of him because he was 5 years old and his father committed his crimes with him in the backseat. She wasn't interested in the color of his hair or how his body was built. She was curious to know what expression could be read in his eyes. She could only ever imagine a vaguely defined little boy, a smudge of brown hair over a pale face with eyes stunned into blankness. And within that vacuum, what would take hold? She knew already by then that absence was not the presence of nothing. It was the phantom presence of someone who had gone or had been taken. Absence begets absence. A life was taken, and those left behind were taken from too. The shockwaves reached out and out and out until everyone was unsteady on their feet. Dawn thought that surely everyone in this city should be quaking, struggling to keep their footing. She started to resent those who could still walk steady here, and that resentment took hold in her, formed its way deep inside her, and latched on.
J.M. Frey is an author, voice actor, and laugh academic. She writes queer, speculative fiction and fantasy, both fabulous, cozy romances and high fantasy epics. Her life ambition is to step foot on every continent, only 3 left. She lives in Toronto, where she is surrounded by house plants because she is allergic to anything with fur. She is also allergic to chocolate, but not wine.
Thank you. Everybody. I'm never so like. I played Annie at 17. I'm short again. Thank you. So, thank you everybody for being here. Thank you again to everybody who organizes this. I'm quite lucky. This is my second time at Brockton, and the first time was back in 2009 with my debut novel, Triptych. I think you were actually my very first public reading.
Ooh.
And so here I am again with book number 11. Yeah. I'm shocked because people are still buying them. So I am here to talk about Time and Tide, which came out last November. And I will tell you a little bit about this book. Everybody else has told a little bit about the book, so I'll tell a little bit. I came up with this idea in 2011 when I was traveling in England. I was headed over to Wales to do some BBC stuff, and I was like, well, I'm a Janeite, I have to go to Chawton Cottage, I have to go to Bath. Even though Jane hated Bath, and we all associate Jane Austen with Bath, I have to go. And while I was at the Jane Austen Center, for those of you who don't know, we have vanishingly few of Jane Austen's surviving personal letters, because her sister, Cassandra, depending on how you want to pronounce it, upon her death, burnt about 3,000. And the writers in the room are like, oh my God, the processes, we've lost the insight. But Cassandra did it because at the end of her life, Jane was starting to become known. She published anonymously originally, but by the time Emma came out, it was an open secret that Jane Austen was the lady who was writing these books. And Jane did not want to be famous. She did not want to be a figure of public ridicule. And Fanny Bryce's letters had been published a couple years prior and torn apart by the public. And Cassandra knew that Jane Austen's letters, which were filled with her witticisms about family members and moaning about their money troubles, they were just like, she was just like, let me circumvent this, let me just protect my sister. And she burned all these letters. So there's very few that still survive. And some of the ones that survive are ones that were written to Jane Austen's best friend, Martha Lloyd. None of you have heard of Martha Lloyd because nobody talks about Martha Lloyd. But Martha Lloyd was Jane Austen's best friend her whole life. And Martha Lloyd grew up next to the Austens. And when Martha's sisters married and her father passed away and then her mother passed away, Martha had no husband, no children to look after her, so she moved in with the Austen ladies after their father died. And then when they got into financial troubles and they had to move into cheaper accommodation, Martha went with them. And then when they had to move again to cheaper accommodations, Martha went with them. And then when Jane Austen's brother finally inherited the knight's fortune and they got to move into Chawton Cottage, Martha went with them. And then when Jane Austen was proposed to, and she could have had a really, really nice life with a vaguely handsome suitor who was, 10 years younger than her, but was a good family friend, she didn't. She said yes in the evening and no thank you in the morning. And we don't really know what happened overnight. People say, oh, Cassandra said to her, you're such a good writer, you have to give that up. If you were the mistress of many down, if you were, his name was Big Wither. If you were Mrs. Big Wither, you'd have to be a great lady in the county, you never get a chance to write, and don't you believe in your own story? And then Jane said, no, but what if there was another reason? And then Jane Austen passed away at age 41 of what people kind of think is Hodgkin's disease, but they're not sure. And only then did Martha marry Jane Austen's little brother, who then became the Admiral of Halifax. And they actually lived in a house in Halifax. So I am not an Austen. I don't know the Austen family secrets. I don't know what the Austen family wants to share or not share. But the storyteller in me was like, oh, and they were roommates? So I came up with the idea for Time and Tide. I wanted to tell a story about what it meant to be a woman writer in the Regency era, what you had to give up, like financial security, like anonymity, like agency. Back then you had to sell your entire book. So you didn't get to keep copyright, you didn't really get royalties, you just sold your book. And then all the time it would take to write, the fact that between Martha, Mrs. Austen, and Cassandra, Jane only had like 2 or 3 chores in the house, and everybody did everything else. So Jane the genius could sit in the parlor and write. So who had to sacrifice what? So Jane Austen, as we know her, could exist. I wanted to write about what it meant to be a woman writer back then. But I also wanted to talk about when they were roommates. And then I decided to fictionalize it. And then I thought, hey, I like time travel stories. Why not do one of those too? So this story, my narrator is also called Sam. And Sam is a disaster bisexual from 2025 who has graduated university with a degree in gender studies and gender activism and equality, or activism. I said that word already. And she's supposed to go on holiday with her girlfriend, and when they get back, her girlfriend's going to come out to her family. That's the whole plan. The girlfriend abandons her at Pearson, says, I can't do this, I can't come out, I can't do that to my mother, you go without me. So Sam, in a rage, decides to go on their holiday alone. The plane crashes halfway across the Atlantic, and she lands in the ocean, and somehow, and no, I don't explain it, wakes up in the middle of the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805, where she's rescued by a man named Francis. Good enough. And he eventually figures out that she's a time traveler, although they don't know how to get her back. And he has installed her with his sisters and his mother, so she can be taken care of because she has no man to protect her and no identity papers to vouch for and no money. So we're picking up halfway through the book where Sam has met and fallen in love with Francis's sister Margaret, who is my Jane Austen analogous character. Sam has given her cell phone to Francis to sell so he can make money, so she can have some income. And now they're discussing that. As I was still in my PJs, Fenton, not Francis, stood carefully outside the door. Eliza bid me adieu and kissed him sweetly on her way out. Fenton lingered just long enough to tell me that he'd managed to sell my own smartphone for an obscene amount of clink to a fascinated science kook in London. It was far more than I ever could have earned in prizes, he said. More than enough for my needs. I think perhaps you are very proud, Samantha, but I do beg you to take this along with my deepest thanks. He held out a leather pouch that clinked softly when I accepted it. You know, I don't know what this is worth, I told him. It's enough to purchase some clothing of your own, to pay for your share of the meals and the carriages until the wedding, and for several months of your lodging with my sisters and mother. It will tide you over comfortably. I could give you more if you desire. This is enough. As soon as I start teaching, I will be self-sufficient. It was your little device, after all. It was a gift, Fenton. Shut up and accept it. He dimpled at me. I do so enjoy your turns of phrase. I snorted. Right. Now, get out. I'm practically naked. Luckily, then, that I have managed to wheedle a spare dress out of Miss Gale's lady's maid, Daisy, that's Margaret, said, appearing over Fenton's shoulder. You are dismissed, Bird. Aye, aye, Commodore, Fenton said, tossing off a rigid salute and marching away like a toy soldier. Our room is turned into the town square. I stepped aside so Daisy could come in. Feels like everybody's dropped by today. Nearly everyone, Daisy said with a sarcastic twist. The linen drapers arrived downstairs. I could invite him up, so should you so desire. Yeah, I'll pass. I skimmed out of my dressing gown. What is a linen draper? Daisy gave me another of those pinning me to a corkboard looks before shaking her head a little in disbelief. A feather of cloth. Here is a chemise for you. Quick, now turn and I shall tie off your stays and dress. The dress itself was taupe, made of serviceable cotton, and printed with a rolling pattern of dark brown and mustard yellow daffodils. As she helped me, she lingered at the nape of my neck, the soft skin inside my elbow, the vulnerable tops of my feet as she checked the length. I tensed to suppress a shiver. She didn't mean it like that. Oh, no matter how much I wanted her to mean it like that. Are you much recovered from your queer turn? Oh, at some point I was going to have to stop finding people using the word queer that way funny. Today was not going to be that day, though. So I snorted. Taking it to mean something deeper, Daisy gave the ties in the back of my dress one final tug and stepped away. When I turned to face her, she was staring out the window, stiff-backed and pouting. Are you okay? Have I done something amiss? What? Daisy gestured at her writing desk, which she had closed up into a case and tucked beside her trunk. You have spent all morning behaving oddly around me, and I suspected it is due to that. No, I said. I mean, yes, no, there's nothing wrong. She rose to face me, fists clenched and fire in her eyes. Then what, pray tell, do you find so distasteful? You call my writing good, and yet you are overcome with nerves from just reading a few paragraphs. Pause here. She recognized it because obviously she read the book 200 years later. I know it is not a ladylike pastime. I know it is not a ladylike pastime, and yet you say that you eschew such rigid roles in society. And yet you behave as if my hobby offends you. You call me friend, but share secrets with my brother that you do not disclose to me. You find my proximity uncomfortable. You shrink from my touch. You disdain to share a bed with me, sleeping against the wall or on the furthest edge. Yet you stare at me when I speak, as if I am a greater orator than any who's ever lived. You bewilder me, Samantha Franklin. I confused her. Daisy, I don't. Honestly, I don't know how to explain it. Please, try, Daisy begged, and the way she said it curled around my heart like a lover's fingers. I do not know what I want, only that I cannot bear to lose your regard over my scribbling. I swear, you haven't, I promised. I held out my hands and she gripped them immediately. It's amazing what you do. I know how fiercely you have to carve out and defend your time and your right to do it, because I've read about it 200 years from now. And I think it's incredible. Then why do you recoil? Because oh, fuck. I was gonna do it. I was gonna kiss Margaret good enough. I slid my hands up her arms, cupped her shoulders, rolled up onto my tiptoes. Daisy's mouth parted in confusion, then in surprise as I leaned closer and tilted my head, then in anticipation as she understood what I meant to do. Her tongue was a pink, wet flash against her bottom lip. Her spun gold lashes fluttered as we, Daisy! Her sister called from down the hall, harsh and sudden. We startled apart like cats doused with a surprise bucket of cold water, though, with less yelling. Hasten yourself! Okay. Mark Marigold added when Daisy's only reply was a grumble. Miss Eliza seeks your opinion on the twill stuff. I threw my head back and laughed. Because of course. Daisy's annoyance broke like a wave upon the shore. She hopped a chuckle, more amused with my amusement than the interruption, but made for the door. Okay. So we weren't talking about it. Cool. Cool. I could do not talking about it. Shit. Thank you.
All right, no. Oh, we need all the writers back up here. We can put chairs, you don't have to stand it. But we're gonna do Q&A.
Q&A for the office. Calling all the authors back up to the stage.
You have to turn this on my phone.
When we go to the
One more. Okay, are you sure? Okay. You need to adjust your camera next time. Sitting down.
all right.
We need to huddle.
Is that good?
This one?
Yeah, how, you know. Up there. Okay.
Is that good? I can't see anything. That's good? Is that good?
Great job. All right, it's question time, Brockton writers. So you can ask a question for all four of them. You can direct the question to just one of them. You can ask your question to the air. And, you know, it can be about writing. It can be about craft. It can be about publishing. It can be about anything. Your little heart desires. We've got four excellent writers across disciplines, across, you know, experience. Just they're amazing, right? So, what do you want to ask them? Right?
So JM and Cassia, you kind of answered this already, but I was curious. I liked how you said there was sort of a spark that like ignited your writing and the idea for it. So I was just curious if the other two authors could share their sparks for their book.
I wrote it a lot during the pandemic, like during the lockdowns. I lived alone at the time, and I can like be alone a lot, but I was like, oh my God. I also like to go out a lot, so all of a sudden I couldn't see anyone, right? I was just alone in my apartment for like weeks, if not months. So I was like, you have to do something or you will lose your little mind. So I just started writing. Like I always wrote, but I would kind of start and then like never finish anything. So I just started writing and it kept kind of going, and then you can kind of build from there. But I actually can't remember what I wrote first of the book. So I don't really know where it started.
I think the answer is pandemic trauma.
In my case, my first novel, which came out in 2017, was a very interior novel. And it was about a woman whose husband had died, and a lot of memory and grieving and reflecting and very interior. So I wanted my second novel to be more outward looking. And I had a lot of ideas about this small town in Ontario. And the more I started exploring and inventing the characters, the more the issues started to broaden. And then the stories were not just about the people who populated the town, but how the town operated and how its economy had changed and how the social classes were very marked and that kind of thing. And so my narrator, her perspective and scope changed. She was there to write a very narrow, specific piece of it as she observed and learned talk to people, she started seeing a bigger picture. And so it was through the character development that the idea and the themes for the history that the family's experience before coming to that town kind of sparked. And once that became a theme in the family of Jay and his ancestors, then the shift to having the narrator Sam started exploring her own background and her Norwegian relatives and how perhaps they also lived in a town that had a lot of shame and secrets. That started evolving, and then the character evolved into kind of an evolving writer herself, and so the story evolved with her, and then it became really fun to write in terms of playing with the form of a novel, because the themes and the characters are so multiple and complex that I needed to find a form that also let me explore all those different huge issues and still continue within the novel. So I started doing a lot of kind of more experimental things, and the novel ended up being kind of a hybrid of fiction and history. And so I guess it was just the spark was inventing and learning about this German character in this small town, and that kind of took off from there.
I thought either of you have something to say about Spark, since you did already say a little bit about Spark. But do you have anything to add to Spark?
Ideas come from anywhere.
Anywhere.
I mean, it's the thing for me, ideas come from like watching a movie and going, that's an interesting scene. What if I told that scene completely from the opposite point of view and they were all dogs? So for me, it's like a line or a Spider-Man word. Like if I binge watch a historical and then I watch something else and I'm like, what if I took that character and I did that? I grew up in fan fiction, so a lot of my ideas are very sticky kind of ideas, crossovers and things like that. And then I try to find the essence of what I like. The gimmick is cute, but what's the essence of this actual story? Who is this person? What's the world building of this world I'm creating? And that's where the story comes from. But yeah, for me, it's like a line in a poem, or something I've seen on a billboard, or watching Tom Holland flip upside down and think, that'd be really funny if he was a dragon. They literally just come from anywhere. When people say, oh, I have a great idea for a book, you write it, we'll split the royalties. I'm like, I have 100 ideas before my morning coffee. I don't need your ideas. What I need is to distill them into something usable.
No? Second?
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, just a comment. Well, Kristen Dunst was a vampire before she was Peter Parker's girlfriend, by the way. Vampire 1994.
I feel like that's a story too.
Yeah. Old school, back to Phoenix. Thank you.
Any questions? No, none then?
We're just that good.
You answered everything. Okay, well, I mean, okay.
I have a question about the novel medium. Have you ever tried writing like short stories or poetry as well? Like, why did you choose the novel, and have you ever tried anything else?
Yeah, I tried them all. I think I started out writing poetry. I published a couple of poems, but you know how they say, a failed poet is a short story writer. A failed short story writer becomes a novelist, and then failed novelist becomes a critic. So I'm on my way. I tried them all. Some poetry, some short stories. Now I'm on novels, and you know, I hope I will just stay there.
I kind of went the opposite direction. Started out as a critic, an academic, a literary critic, and then I published a collection of stories. And my stories started getting longer and longer and longer, and what I wanted to explore in them became bigger, the topics, and then I I needed something larger to contain it, so that's how I switched into writing novels.
I don't write poetry, and I don't really write short stories either. Like, I've tried, but I never really finish them. But I've written a couple of like short nonfiction pieces.
I started in fan fiction, and then from there, so I was a child actor. So when you're an actor, you spend a lot of time making up stories, doing improv, and figuring out your character's backstory. So naturally, plays, and then I went to theater school, so screenplays. Never sold any of those. You'll notice I am not Lin-Manuel Miranda. And then I got hit by a car, and I was like, well, I guess now's the time to try writing an original novel. People seem to like my fan fiction, so I can make up characters. So while I was laid up with a broken everything, I wrote Triptych, and it did okay. Publishers Weekly Best Books of the Year, so can't complain. And then, yeah, some poems as the inspiration struck. I still do academic work. Some short stories. Mostly, I dabbled in short stories because I was told that if you want to publish a novel, you have to have short stories published first. And I took that to heart, and I took that very seriously. So I did a short story collection, and I sold all of the stories in different to different anthologies. And then as soon as I got my first novel contract, I was like, done with that. They're too hard. People who can write short stories, I don't understand your brain. You guys are amazing. I can't do it. It's so hard. And then, yeah, just novels, because that seems to be the length of story my stories like.
Adriana, we're really quick on that, but like you work as an native and a telefilm. Does like film inform your novel or your work at all?
Yeah, I think for sure it does. You can like read a movie. I always say kind of like you can read a book it's just a different language, right? It's a cinematic language versus a literary language. And I kind of like visualize scenes, I think. Like I'll see a scene in my head and then I'll start writing that scene. Like it'll be like, oh, okay, this is like, not every single scene, but like largely if I'm getting inspiration, it's like I'm seeing a scene in my head and I'm like, how is that? What are they doing? What else could they be doing? So yeah, I think so. And then when I write, I think because I'm kind of describing sometimes like an image, I think it can be, it definitely relates to cinema now.
Any final questions or anything from online? Okay, so we have one question that we always end with. We ask everybody to recommend one, ideally only one, book that you think people should read. One. People are not good at sticking with one, but what is one book that you've read, ideally somewhat recently, but one book that you really, really recommend that people read? We round these up, we post them on social media. You can say Stanford. Jam Stanford says Stanford.
I'd like to recommend a Polish writer whose books some of her books are translated into English. She lives in the UK, and the book I want to recommend is a collection of short stories. The title is Swallowing Mercury. She's my age, and she grew up on a small Polish farm. Her parents were farmers, and it's a very poetic collection about her growing up on the farm, which might be interesting to you because it's hard life, but at the same time it has beauty, and because she's also a poet, it's very beautifully written. She describes her dad was a taxidermist. Together with being a farmer, and also she, I think, describes her experiences as a teen, growing up on a farm as a teen. And what's your name? Violetta Gregg, G-R-E-G. And this book was shortlisted for the Booker, I think, I don't know, 5 years ago maybe. So yeah.
I think Love Medicine by Louise Erdrich. She's a native writer from the States, like North South Dakota. So like great if you know geography, which I don't know well at all, but I'm from Manitoba, so it's like Manitoba and North South Dakota are like the same thing, right? There's a border there, but our people were like, there wasn't a border back then. So she is an amazing writer. I really, really love her work and Love Medicine in particular. It's a really beautiful book. It's Erdrich. I think that's how you say it. Erdrich. Erdrich.
Well, one book that I just finished recently that I would strongly recommend is called Dark and Bloom. That's all one word. And it's the anglicized name of a town in Austria. It's written by Eva Manasse, M-E-N-A-S-S-E. And it was translated, but I don't remember the translator's name, I hate to say. But similar to my novel, I guess, Dark and Bloom is a small town in Austria, and the book has a kind of an omniscient narrator that is half in the society and half judging the society, and it's about all the people who live in this town and who lived through World War II and the experience of Jewish people in the town. So similar themes, I guess, to what I was just talking about with my own novel. It was an excellent book.
I'm going to recommend the Canadian poet / novelist Anne Carson and her novel, The Autobiography of Red, which is a queer retelling of the 10th labor of Heracles, but set in like 1970s Argentina. It's really, really good, and it's poetry, but it's like straight prose, and it's just gorgeous. It's evocative. And what she's done with the story is, so the 10th labor is when Heracles goes and tries to steal the cows from Geryon, the red monster, who has eyes all the way around his head. And the way that Heracles wins is he shoots him in the head with an arrow. And in the original poem, it talks about Geryon's head falling to the side with arrows, like a blown poppy. In the book, Anne Carson it switches arrows for eros. So that moment where his head falls to the side like a blown poppy, something else is blowing. But it's beautiful. So everything that is violent is turned to love in the book, and it's just gorgeous.
Thank you all. Thank you all for being here with us tonight. Thank you to GladTech. Thank you to our audience, to our volunteers. Thank you to the Ontario. Thank you to the Ontario Arts Council for allowing us to be here today. Please stick around, grab a drink, buy a book from the authors who have books. Karen and Kasha both have books to sell. You can take a look at these QT magazines right here. I think some of them are for sale as well. And you can mark your calendars for July 9th, which is the next Brockton. We will be featuring readings from Morgan Christie, Martha Batiste, Jessica Popesky, and China Marie Sage. And as always, we'll bring in an industry professional to teach us something about the craft or business of writing. Thank you all. Good night.